Working with the Etudes is a great musical experience.
They have really developed how my individual fingers work.
It has had a powerful effect on my physical self, an ability to let go more and more, to not fight against a sort of a necessary relaxed movement. And I've also found that it increasingly draws my attention immediately to the sound that I produce, much more than a focus on like my internal body or some of these things. You really get a sense from them that you need to master a sort of a personal control over, your nerves, over your emotions, and even your thinking. And the works themselves guide you to both the movements and the type of thoughts that will allow you to learn to flow through the entire composition as a player.
I started to kind of get a grasp that the point of the Etudes was to encompass all techniques of piano playing, kind of regardless of the genre or the tonality of the pieces. And so I performed some of the finger paintings, and more recently have moved on to the moving Etudes and the figures. And I learned more and more that anything that can happen in piano technique happens in these Etudes.
So whenever you have a new piece in your repertoire, they offer you this testing ground, this almost an attempt and a place to really learn how to do a certain skill.
I had a really powerful sense that his materials, both the compendium of piano technique and the accompanying series of etudes and many of his other writings and works, in comparison with other material, I found the approach to be both holistic and offered many resources that allowed for long-term growth, and a kind of growth one could foster both with a teacher and alone in one's own work.
So the Etudes are a really great opportunity to not only look at them compositionally, which is kind of exciting, but also educationally. You have, first of all, the finger paintings, which presents the Etudes in a very sort of bare bones, minimalistic way. Then you move on to the moving, which is slightly harder, and then the figures. Each of them presents a series of technical challenges to them in a way that you can really master them.
I've mostly worked with the finger painting etudes, and I think that has helped me definitely with fingering. I know there are a lot of the etudes that deal with using all possible alternatives to fingerings, and I think that it's helped me think about what kind of fingerings I want to use in my own repertoire that I'm learning. So I find that maneuvering my fingers around the music is a lot easier because of the etudes.
When you go through the finger paintings, the practicing involved with it, I've often incorporated into my other rep. So if that's, for instance, playing one figure with my left hand that I used to play with my right, or reversing the hands, it's a great way to practice, which is what an etude is for your general repertoire.
Mirrorvisions in particular is a really challenging work involving layers of circles with the hands usually placed right over one another. Often you have arrangements of black keys in one hand and white keys in the other, and all of this sort of bound together with different amounts of notes in each hand. So you really are forced to go slowly through the work to understand each component of it on its own. I also found Etude 53 is challenging in a whole different way, where you need to have lots of energy. It's a powerful piece. It's aggressive and has moments of sort of going into a really deep introspection and tranquility. And similarly, that piece uses a little bit of his style of building these sort of circular movements. But it's this second one, Etude 53, is a lot more varied in terms of focus on a single melody and accompaniment, or things emerging out of a series of circles somehow, that you hear one prominent note here and there become a melody. So there's really a lot of thinking that you need to do that is entirely based on listening and actually being quite physically and mentally relaxed. It's some of the best piano training I've yet experienced.
I find that the educational style of the compendiums is really presented in a wonderful way. It's presented concisely, yet thoroughly.
The compendium, it starts with the basics, all the basic movements, and it makes sense. These are all things that you think about and you know, but the compendium puts it in words and puts it into movements and gives it names, which makes it easier for you to identify and pinpoint what exactly you need to work on. So it's like, wow, I have tension here and here, and working through the compendium, it gives you exercises, and it explains where the different movements come from, and gives one ideas about what kind of movements they should be making for certain pieces that would allow flexibility, that would allow less tension, and that would allow a cleaner sound, cleaner playing, and just a better experience at the piano altogether.
It goes into different movements that would come up in all kinds of repertoire. So like maybe arm circles or finger throws or things like that. That really made me that really made me apply it to the music that I was playing. And it's improved my playing a lot. So now I know, oh, this passage has these kinds of notes, so I can do a finger throw here. Or there's an ascending and descending scale pattern, so I can do maybe an arm circle here or something like that. So did little things like that, and it's helped my playing come a long way.
Going through the exercises in the compendium has made it easier for my fingers to work independently and then independently together.
It taught me, most importantly, that there's always at least two ways to do anything. And it's more about finding your own style rather than trying to employ something that doesn't work for you and making touches on the piano that don't work for you. And how I find this compendium is kind of an education of technicality in order to supplement your own musicality. Because he's not trying to teach you technical things that you might already know or that might not work for you. He's trying to introduce you to ideas that you might not be familiar with, and they might not work for you, but that's okay, because on the next page, there's another one that will.
Additionally, I would say that working with Steinbach's technique is really fascinating because it's not dogmatic. It isn't a set way of performing at all. It's multiple ways to get the best result, and ultimately, the best result is the music itself. So it's entirely liberating as a performer and as a future teacher to know that I have these opportunities and different toolboxes to go to for the future.